All right. Hey there, everyone. Welcome to The Hypothesis. This is a very cool and unique opportunity and a time to present something that has been under examination, scrutiny, research for almost 2 solid years. And while alluded to previously, it's now time to present the entire hypothesis as it exists currently. And we have split this into 4 parts. The first being the introduction today. You probably have never heard such a thing before. Number one, I'd like to thank my research partner, Taryn. You can find her at Madam Rex on the X platform. She's so valuable. Her help, feedback, and assistance in everything that you're about to hear. And so I look forward to continuing this journey with her and with all of you. You can find me on the X platform right there, Mantei4, Mantei4, for daily interaction. Okay, number one, what is behind the UFO phenomenon? That is the question. That is what drove this hypothesis, which you're about to hear. Number one, what is this really and what is it not? Why isn't it called a theory? I'm sticking with the very strict tradition of science on these terms, where a hypothesis basically is just an idea you can throw out there and test and see if it's turned out to be testable or true, or maybe partially true, or you're on the right track, things of that nature. Whereas a theory is more fleshed out and you've tested it and it stands up to the tests, to the scrutiny, to what you think is going to happen actually does happen, or what you are proposing actually does exist, or it exhibits, return on what you're expecting to see or to measure. So it really is a theory in that way. However, it's not testable at this time. It's not testable at this time because the phenomenon, as it's colloquially called, is not allowing it to be tested at this time. And those of us in the normal world, whether it be governments or organizations and so forth, or as individuals, we don't have all the information for everyone to look at that would provide for testing or verification, viability, questioning further. Okay, so with that understood, that's why we're calling it a hypothesis. As a Christian man, that's my worldview. The reflexive, common theories about this UFO phenomenon don't sit well with me. They don't sit well as a Christian, and they don't sit well as a person who just wants the truth, because the truth always matters. That's what I am after. That's what I think we're all after, right? What is true? That's a Christian ethos. And so nothing that is true could possibly contradict if I believe God is my Father and Jesus is the Son of God and he died for my sins, he rose from the dead, the Holy Spirit is with us. Like all that, none of that would conflict if something is true. So the two common reflexive theories are extraterrestrials on one side and demons on the other. If you ask an average, a Christian who's into their Bible and serious about their faith, usually the response is something along the lines of it's demonic. Some people say angels, but it's in that angel and demon realm, and that's all it is, and they already have decided on that. Versus the other end of it, which is the New Age side, basically. Again, there's exceptions to this, of course, but it's obviously extraterrestrial. It's obviously some other life form from somewhere else in the universe that's not from our planet. And because we see these things, and obviously they're so far beyond what we have as a society, it's got to be some other form of life, some other civilization. And there's lots of, structure around that belief. And it's been going on for a long time, for decades and decades. So the truth matters, right? So personally, I did not begin this journey of coming up with the best impression about what actually is happening. I didn't throw anything out. I left it all on the table. I said, okay, well, I'm willing to accept ETs, demons, or everything in between. That's crypto-terrestrials, ultra-terrestrials, you name it. Time traveling, you name it. All of it. I said, I just want to know what the truth is. So this is the best understanding that I could glean after all that. So I'm not against anything by nature. I'm not for anything by nature. I just want the best of our ability to understand what is really happening. Some assumptions coming in are transmedium, what we would call UFOs, UAPs, whatever shape they come in. There are various shapes and various mediums. In other words, in space, in the sky, the upper atmosphere, the lower atmosphere, in your house, in the water, and even underground. All of this has been witnessed and claimed. So I'm assuming that whatever those are, and whoever's behind that, those things are real. That's assumption number one. And corollary to that is they have been around for a long time, at least 100 years, probably far longer. So again, now we start to branch off into people's theories and things where 1947, while being a major year for the phenomenon being noticed or being experienced by many people and coming into our collective imagination or consciousness, or just knowing that it's a thing, while that you might argue started in 1947, it goes way before that. So we can't use that as a starting point. And things that may or may not have been done in the other realms of folks trying to summon this and that or whatever, it was just way older than that. So I'm going on 100 years plus of experience and assuming that this has been happening for that long. Second assumption is that experiencers, however you want to think of that term, someone who has experienced a UFO or a visitation or something along those lines, are telling the truth. Not all of them have, granted, but if they are claiming that, I'm not going to assume they're making it up. And now we've gone many, many decades of actual, verifiable, multi-witness situations where, it's kind of similar over and over and over, and these people don't know each other and there's no connection point at all, but yet certain things are happening again and again. So that brings it up to the level of, well, I don't know if what they understand happened to them is the truth, but to know that something did, or to assume that something actually real did happen, is what I'm referring to. So that's assumption number two. They're having a real experience. Whether they understand it all or not, whether they're getting the true information, whether they're remembering it accurately and all that, I'm not saying any of that, but that the experience itself is a real thing. They're not making it up. There's no cashing in. There's no ulterior motive. That legitimate experiencers are legitimate people with legitimate things happening. Now, would you classify me as one of them? It depends who you ask. But I've seen 2 UFOs in my life. One as a small child, and one last year. One was a light in the sky at night, and one was a metallic-looking sphere hanging out over a highway. And in the recent case, it just was there, and then it just wasn't. So I don't have any good explanation for that, but I'm one of the people who've seen it. And many people are good with these assumptions who've never seen anything. But some folks have, and more than that, they've experienced things that are not pleasant. The abduction scenarios, experimentations, things of this nature, not fun, not cool, not good, but they too have to be believed as having a legitimate something happening. Okay, so those are the assumptions. Many times once we start forming opinions and hypotheses and theories, we tend to settle into a category of it's either nuts and bolts, in other words, physical crafts and bodies, just like from another civilization, and that's all it is. And we don't know how it all works, but that's what it is. Versus the woo, what we call the woo, okay? The stuff that blows our mind, like what is happening? How is this possible? I'm not talking about just about how these vehicles or whatever they are traveling, which is almost at that level, but all the associated experiences from the beings and the connections with our minds and getting instant knowledge and downloads of information that you have no ability to get on your own, and poof, it's there. I mean, there's 1,000 examples of this, of what we would call woo. It's a false choice, is what we have come to the conclusion of. You can't separate them. It's both. There's aspects of both. And again, there's a great literature on this, like the physical craft side of it versus the more spiritual experience or the woo stuff. You've got different, very famous authors and researchers on both sides. If you don't know who they are, we're going to talk about that more at the end and when we write this up afterwards. And finally, don't conflate spiritual things with invisible things. That's a major theme that kept coming up over and over the past 2 years, which is for myself and for the audience and for people who are looking into these things. So often, we would equate, especially the Christian side, something that's invisible with something that is spiritual. I've got to push back on that very strongly. Viruses are invisible to our naked eyes. Gravity is invisible, but we know they're real, and they're not spiritual beings. And they're not spiritual powers. Nothing spiritual about them. They're just things we can't see. And there's many, many more examples. Those are just easy to imagine. Like, oh, okay, yeah. Can't see them doesn't mean they're spiritual things. So we may be seeing a complex technology, for example, that would make something invisible, like a flying saucer. Oh, it's there, poof, it's gone. Like my example with my own sighting. It just wasn't there. It was, and then it wasn't. So if there's a complex technology to make something invisible, or as we were saying, a human brain abilities, whether you call it psychic or whatever, or automatic knowledge of certain things, which are inherently invisible, are not necessarily spirit. Right? My thoughts, or the waves that and the technology that is bringing my sound and voice and picture to you on your phone or your device, your computer, whatever, those things are invisible. Wi-Fi is invisible, but it's not a spiritual thing. Okay, point made. All right, so what exactly have we determined? What is this hypothesis? We are proposing that the UFO phenomenon are not explained by the conventional theories of extraterrestrial life or by spiritual entities. In other words, what we commonly refer to as angels and demons. And whatever kind of angel you want, fallen or otherwise. Those are not what we see is happening. But instead, we are proposing that what you are seeing is connected to a hidden civilization of advanced human beings. These humans descended from those who received forbidden knowledge from what you would term the fallen angels in Genesis chapter 6 in ancient times. They are either those original people who are cheating death or the descendants of those people. People have been and may still right now be using advanced technology to deceive the public and pursue a long-term agenda. This hypothesis draws on many things, including biblical accounts, which I just said, particularly from Genesis 6, but also the book of Enoch and other scriptures, as well as historical research, data, and testimony from both the past and the present, because it's ongoing. And the further we go along, the better data, recordings, videos, etc. It suggests, this hypothesis, that these beings that are behind the UFO phenomenon, not just the vehicles or whatever we're seeing in our skies and oceans, etc., not just that, but what is behind them, those beings are not aliens and are not spiritual entities, but advanced human beings with a nefarious plan. That is the baseline of what we're working from. The introduction to this hypothesis, I don't know how it's going to rub people. I don't know how the response will be or what the response will be. Don't really care. Other than, again, this is not to be original or different. This is not to split some kind of non-existent, baby, as it were. It's because of what seems to be the evidence and data. For example, and we're going to wrap this up with this thought. Why is it, number one, if it's an alien race, why do they look exactly like us? I mean, every being that we see, even if they're more animalistic, or your typical gray, or even a mantid, or some kind of lizard form, or something else, or a tall white, right, or Nordic, and we're going to get into all those in these next sections, but everything looks like a human being, anthropomorphically, right? 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, some kind of central trunk, body, and most, if not all, have some kind of eyes, nose, mouth, ears, even if maybe they don't have visible ears or mouth or something, but basically it's the same look. That doesn't compute for something that's a million light years away. Number 2, why there's interest in people, because that seems to be the conclusion that we're reaching. The interest isn't in the planet. I just don't see that. I mean, I hear claims, we hear the theories about that, but I don't see the evidence of that. I don't see that they care enough to stop nuclear detonations. For example, that's another theory. They're concerned about the planet from being destroyed by nuclear weapons. Like, okay, but ask the Japanese that. What about conventional warfare? They don't care about that. Biological weapons? The millions upon millions upon millions upon millions who have been killed just in this century, the past 100 years, this frame that we're working on. We know the UFO phenomenon has been here that long, and this is the most deadly, perversely wanton, murderous era in human history. Millions after millions after millions. You think they care about genocide? Ask the Jews. Or a bunch of different groups in Africa. Or again, and I mean, it's replete with human on human cruelty. So if their end game, which we're going to get to in the final section called the end game, if the end game of this intelligence behind the UFO phenomenon has to do with saving humanity or some kind of evolution of the species, they are horribly failing. And frankly, they're failing at making themselves known. And that's a big part of all of this, which is that the intentionality of staying hidden and being in secret. I will address that more in part 2. Okay, at this point, let's open it up for questions on what you just heard. If there is nothing, that is fine. But we're going to use this time now to take that if you have them. Hey, T-Rex, what's going on, partner? Mokul is all international audience. There's our friend Bond Servant and all y'all out there. Again, if you're watching on X, YouTube, Facebook, especially the YouTube channel, that's really important to support. Honestly, that's how we're going to grow the viewership of this. And obviously, there's membership available through the YouTube channel, through my X account as well. I asked for a change on that. It was like 2 years ago when I first, or longer, I don't even know, when they first permitted you to, set up a support button or whatever. I was like, how about $10? I don't know. Well, $10 is usually more than folks will pay, and then folks charge. I'm like, can I change this? Just recently they let you submit a change request, so maybe it'll go to $5. I don't know. Point is, anything you can do to help is much appreciated. Sharing is probably the best thing you can do, and direct support for all that we do here at Wings of the Eagle is much, much needed and appreciated. wingsoftheeagle.com. You can go to /support unsealed, and there we'll have your episodes for this podcast and a link directly to help. Okay. All right. So if we've got nothing, that's great. We'll just wrap it here for this week. And the plan is we made a graphic that we put out there yesterday for the next 4 consecutive weeks. We're going to present this hypothesis. Today was the introduction. Next week will be phase 2, which is what did I call it? Nephilim to Babel. That will intrigue probably the Christians of the audience, and maybe those who are assuming or have heard or interested in the fact that, yes, an ancient biblical text may shed light on what we're experiencing now. I think many people would agree to that or are open to that interpretation or idea. So I do think that is part of it. So next week is Nephilim to Babel. And then after that to the more about the crafts themselves and what we're seeing, the UFOs, the orbs, and the cover-ups from our governments. And then the end game as part 4. Bond Servant is in as usual with the first question. Do you think then government knows this about your final thoughts of these are humanoid? Could you ask that again? Do you mean is the folks who know a lot more than your average Joe, are they aware? Well, they humanoid just means they look like a human, and they're definitely aware of that. Everyone who's had experience is aware of that, right? You never see, I've never heard of a time where they're seeing a monster with 14 heads and 6 bodies and phalanges and like something you would just anything different than 2 arms and 2 legs and a head with forward facing eyes. Even if there's a guy who has talked a lot about this. Shoot, I forget his name off the top. He works. He's a professor in Montana. I'll think of it later. He suggests he's using that rationale for his. I don't know what he actually believes, but he did write a paper that supposes that yes, these are actually humans from the future. When you're seeing your typical gray, and we'll talk about the grays. We've got that part of this hypothesis for sure. But his that comes from the fact that boy, they look a heck of a lot like a human being. Are they aware of these being earthbound beings? Is that why they are silent? I don't think that. I think, of course, with so little being officially said or even leaked or even whistleblown about, you have very little to go on other than the people who are saying they know a little something and can verify, like your David Grushes and Lou Elizondos and so on and so forth. They don't know where they're from. They will come out and just say we don't know. So there, to my understanding, again, the folks that have come out who could possibly know or know what is known seem to not have a grasp on their origins. Everything I've ever heard was like they don't want to speculate on origin. What that means is it could be outer space. It could be some other planet. It could be another dimension or on our own planet, like just something we don't understand about how our universe works. Or it could be something terrestrial that's, again, like you say, this is actually their home and somehow or another they're staying hidden. So they're not speculating on that. I don't think they know the origins. Grush seems to think they're interdimensional. That's not correct. He has, again, there's not a heck of a lot of statements to go on because he's basically become very invisible himself. He has been pressed by Representative Luna on this, but he personally does not venture a guess. He intentionally says it is not known. He does not have an opinion. Or if he does, he hasn't said it. He says it's possible that's what's going on, but he is not coming down on that. It's not. If you listen to the longer form interview he did with Jesse Michaels, I think that was in 2023. He basically, it seems like if he had to guess, he would be on the extraterrestrial side. But he's not, you cannot nail him down on that, no. We do see orbs coming out of volcanoes. I thought Grush said this. Again, he's throwing it out there as a possibility because we don't know for sure. That's why he said it. Yeah, and we do see, I don't know if they're orbs or not. You do see things coming out of volcanoes and around natural phenomenon. Again, yes, volcanoes, yes, the oceans, yes, thunderstorms, yes, out in the atmosphere and in outer space. You see them all those places. So that doesn't lend to an interdimensional origin. It just means they're immune. It might mean that, but it definitely means that they're immune to those conditions. Now that can be done in a very physical way. We don't know how yet. I mean, we can't build such things in our society. But yes, you could conceivably construct regular old cars, basically, okay, technology that you can ride around in that is impervious to those conditions. If you have a little bubble around you, basically. Okay. All right. And yes, we're going to get into all the be as specific as possible with all of that, the beings, the crafts, whatever. We're going to get into all that in later episodes here. All right. Okay. All right. That'll do it, I guess, for today's episode. Again, this has been the introduction to the hypothesis. I know it's not a whole heck of a lot, but to hear that it's not ET and it's not spiritual beings, potentially, just off the top, I did want to include this at the beginning, but I guess I didn't. This hypothesis could be totally wrong. Totally wrong. I'm not betting my, you know what I mean? It's like I'm putting a mortgage on this. It just seems to be the best, most common sense, data-driven, evidence-fueled hypothesis that I could find, or that made sense based on what we've seen and what we've experienced. That's it. So I'm not saying this is true. This is the way, right? Like, you must believe this, or, or you're not credible, or some junk. Some people will do that. A lot of folks have done that and still do it every day. Both the New Age, the Christian, everything in between. If you don't believe my version of it, you're not a real, you can't be trusted. You must be part of the bad guys. You must be in on it somehow. You must be a plant. You must be one of those Christians. You must be one of those atheists or New Agers. Like, it's ridiculous. Madam Rex is prodding me to answer that. Would you briefly mention what we think the grades are to help avoid confusion? Sure, since you asked so nicely. Yeah, so again, we'll get into this more, but your typical gray, it seems to be, and this is not a new opinion, guys. Colonel Corso in the Day After Roswell book has believed this since he first encountered this in the 40s and 50s. What he saw were biological bodies from the crash or the whatever was found in New Mexico. We are postulating that what you would call a gray is a robot. It is they are fabrications, call it what you want, Android, 3D printing. Yes, they're very biological, no doubt. But it's not a life form as we understand it. I believe they are, the hypothesis would say that they are created by this secret society of human beings as for their tasks that they're made to do. I think it's the main reason is to put a level of a veil between them and us, to security layer, so we don't figure out the truth. And that could be true of the various creatures that are seen, and it's possible that if there are more than the grays out there, and many folks say that there are, and they've seen them or interacted with them, it's very possible that almost everything that is seen is a construction, not a spiritual construction, an actual physical being created by their inventors. That's the short answer on that. Clones. Doesn't Bledsoe think the small grays are clones or robots? I don't know what Chris Bledsoe thinks. Clones, to be clone of each other, maybe, but not clone of some, like if I made a clone of me, it would look just like me. Right. So if I'm inventing another something that has to pass as a form of life. Now, again, this kind of sounds very sci-fi and all, but I get that. But that's the hypothesis. The hypothesis is this secret group of human beings is radically advanced in their knowledge of the universe and technology and how things work. All things. And again, we're going to get more into that next time about why they might be on this. They're obsessed with that. But yes, we're talking about tech that is way, way beyond. It's like science fiction. So to say, well, to create a form of life that's lifelike and yet is really artificial, again, that's not that we didn't create that idea at all. Many, many sources claim to, even Whitley Strieber, if you're familiar with anything about this subject, you probably know Whitley Strieber and his account in the book and movie Communion, the book, and them and his follow up on it, and he basically has come down on that side also. Travis Walton, the very famous abduction cases where there's a lot of memory retention. Everyone is not everyone, but many folks, very famous accounts would basically come down on that side of, doesn't seem like, there's things, they're independent, they're autonomous, they're moving themselves. They're not like but the whole hive mind thing comes up, and the fact that they're alive, but they're not really, and they seem to not have their own will, stuff like that. So yeah, it's not a new idea, but something that's not discussed often enough, I don't think. So yes, that's definitely a part of this. So I'm not, again, your average, Christian who looks into this would just say, oh, they're made up, that's demonically, it's an illusion just given to a person to make them think this is what it's an alien. Well, this hypothesis would say not an illusion. They're actual things. They're not the ultimate authority. They're not the creator of the craft that they're in, for example, or whatever. But yeah, they're real things, and that have abilities that seem supernatural but are not. And that's where the whole fuzzy, understanding of something that's spiritual versus invisible, or, how can you manipulate time and space and things of that sort, where we really have to be careful. Okay. All right, my friends, that's good enough for now. So next week, the plan is, again, to come back for part 2 of the hypothesis, the Nephilim to Babel. That is the plan for next week. So we hope to see you then. Please share this. It'll be tremendous, especially on YouTube, at X or Facebook, wherever you happen to be. Tremendous to be with you. Thanks for this opportunity, and we'll be back next time. This is Wings of the Eagle.